Alright, folks, no more fooling around. We're getting serious now. This is going to be the top 6. We're doing 6 through 4 today, getting into the cream of the crop. Let's start with number 6, The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds. I think this is the first time 2 Nintendo games have made it onto the list. 2 games actually developed by Nintendo, because I think in 2010, Donkey Kong Country Returns and Super Mario Galaxy 2 made it into my top 10 that year. But Donkey Kong was made by Retro. This is the first year where Nintendo has got onto the list twice, which says something. For those of you who don't know, who've been living under a rock, this is a spiritual successor to A Link to the Past. One of my favorite games of all time. And in terms of the Zelda franchise, I still think it's second best to Ocarina of Time, at least for me. But A Link to the Past is undoubtedly the game that launched the franchise into the mythic status that it has enjoyed for decades now. So, if you are a little bit hesitant because this is just a sequel to a game that I know backwards and forwards, where this game succeeds in the greatest degree is that it manages to be an homage without being derivative, which I think is the key to any good spiritual successor. Things that are similar: the world layout, the dungeon themes, the sound effects, some of which sound like they were directly lifted from A Link to the Past. Link's equipment, and even the story are all very similar to A Link to the Past. But this game manages to find many ways, exciting ways, to feel really fresh and new and great. The least of which is the 3D visuals. They're beautiful. It's sort of this mixture of retro and neo-retro. Anyone who's familiar with A Link to the Past is going to feel at home immediately, but anyone who looks for that sort of polished sheen of new-aged high def, it's not high def, but 3D graphics, they're really going to enjoy it. They give a great sense of depth, especially there's a couple of dungeons like the Tower of Hera, which are very vertically based. You traverse them vertically, and you really get that sense of depth, especially when you can kind of see down to the floors you've already been to, or the floors that you're trying to get to, and that creates a really great depth to the world. Now, the dungeon themselves are quite different. While they take thematic direction from their A Link to the Past counterparts, some of them are moved around a little bit, and they are very different, I think, from the A Link to the Past dungeons, and different from each other as well. They each have sort of special ways that you move through them and traverse the mechanics that they put forward to you, and some unique puzzles in all the dungeons. And some of them are just flat out new. They're completely different from their A Link to the Past counterpart, as it were. Another really great way that it finds to be fresh, one of my favorite parts of this game, is the item rental mechanic. Basically, there is this shop in the middle of the world that sells for rent all dungeon items for the whole game, pretty much. We're talking all the classics: boomerang, bow and arrows, bombs, hammer, fire rod, ice rod, plus a couple of new ones that I don't want to spoil, that you can rent for a handful of rupees, and you can rent them all at once if you like, and then you just can go out into the world with all of the items. And that creates... when I heard the mechanic originally, I was a little worried that it would ruin the sense of progression, but it totally doesn't. If you die, you lose all the items you rent. But you can buy them after you rent them for a ton of money, like 800 rupees, or for some items, or 1,200. And I know what you're thinking. Well, if I'm really good at the game, what does it matter? I can just rent them and never die, and I'll be perfectly fine. Well, you can also upgrade the items, and you can only upgrade them if you own them. And so then you have to get a bunch of rupees to own all these items. And I definitely got that hunger for 100% completion while playing this game. I also really enjoy the sticking to the walls becoming a painting mechanic. They got crazy mileage out of that. So many puzzles are solved that way, and there's so many hidden areas that you can get to using that mechanic. I want to talk quickly about the difficulty as well. I think this is one of the harder Zelda games that came out recently. I think Zelda games, as of late, have just been too gosh darn easy. Especially Twilight Princess, which I don't think I ever dipped below 3 hearts less than my total in that game. But this sort of brings back some of the Link to the Past difficulty. Like when you first get into the Dark World, enemies are doing like 3 hearts of damage to you. The Lionels up on Death Mountain, good governor, those things do like 3 hearts, 4 hearts of damage to you, and they take like, if you have the level 1 sword, I think they take like 20 hits or something to kill. It's just out of this world. And I never actually saw a game over screen, but I did use plenty of fairies. And I think for anyone who is new to the Zelda series, they're going to be relatively challenged with this game. That's a good thing. And even if you didn't find it very challenging, after you beat it once, a hero mode is unlocked, which I haven't tried, and it's supposed to be even harder. Bottom line, best dungeon designs I've seen in a long time. Some of the best bosses in the whole series. It's just outlandishly fun, and it is the best handheld Zelda game since Minish Cap back in 2004, and possibly the best handheld Zelda game ever. It's just a really, really solid addition to the franchise. Homage, spiritual successor, whatever you want to call it. It's its own game, and it's an excellent game at that. Legend of Zelda: Link Between Worlds. Coming in at number 5, a game which I expected to put higher on this list, but lo and behold, it sits here at 5. It still made the top 5, though. Grand Theft Auto 5. How dare I? How dare I put Rockstar's flagship series all the way at lowly number 5. I don't know, this is just a really competitive year, but let's get into it. First thing I gotta talk about is the character, and specific characters in this game, specifically the character switching mechanic. Whereas in previous Grand Theft Auto games, and in previous Rockstar games entirely, you just played one. I mean, most games you just play as one person. But in this game, the narrative tries to service 3 separate main characters. And this is great. I love the mechanic. It makes for some really exciting, dynamic, and highly alterable missions where you can switch between the 3 characters, especially if all 3 of them are on the mission at once. Let's say one character is flying the helicopter, one's a sniper on a building way off in the distance, and one's actually in the thick of the action. You can just switch between them at will, pretty much. In the game world as well. You're playing as a character, you say you're playing as Michael, you want to see what Franklin's up to. So you switch to Franklin, the camera pans all the way up above the clouds of Los Santos, pans over to where Franklin is, and then zooms back into what he's doing, and he'll just be in the middle of something, and then you'll control him and play as him for a little while. And it's really interesting, it's really unique. I haven't seen a game do that sort of thing before. And it adds something, but it also unfortunately subtracts something. Because the narrative has to service all 3 of these main characters, you do end up loving them, and I do. But you don't feel that hardcore connection that you do. That I did with like Nico in Grand Theft Auto 4, or John Marston in Red Dead Redemption. I still think, personally for me, John Marston is Rockstar's crowning main character achievement. They have yet to reach that level yet. And as such, the story in general, I think, is a bit of a step down from GTA 4 overall. It's definitely a step down emotionally. I think it maybe might be a step up in terms of scope, but emotionally and in terms of your connection to the characters, I think it's unfortunately a bit of a downgrade. But its scope is great. It takes you to all these sort of missions. They're highly varied, and all of them are very fun. It's almost zero that I hated, whereas in Grand Theft Auto 4, there were definitely a few that I just flat out didn't like at all. And the definitely cornerstone of the missions and the story in this game are the heist missions. Rockstar wisely listened to the fan base, who all said that the heist mission from Grand Theft Auto 4, 3-Leaf Clover, was the best mission, and it was. I don't care if you disagree, you're wrong. And they sort of based the story around that. And there's some really great heist missions in this, especially the Polito score, where if you switch to Trevor, he's in this juggernaut suit with a minigun, and it's so over the top and crazy, and you make a ton of money. And it's just crazy amounts of fun. And it's fun, like, setting up the heist too. Like, there's a bunch of heist setup you have to do beforehand, and deciding how you're going to approach the heist. Usually there'll be like 2 different ways you can approach them. And I know what some of you are saying, though. This is GTA. We know there's a story, but who cares? I got hookers to kill. I got cop cars to explode. I've got airplanes to steal. And let me just say that is true. Like with all Grand Theft Auto games, this is no different. There is a wealth of distractions available to you. I literally don't have the time to talk about them all, but I'll just hit upon some of my favorites. Base jumping, super fun. All of the parachute stuff is crazy fun. The tennis mini game, surprisingly deep. I played that for probably a couple hours. just that over the course of the game, and you think, boy, people spent a lot of time programming that, and a lot of people just aren't going to play tennis. I loved the tennis in this. I loved Trevor's rampages are crazy fun. You just go nuts and you kill as many people as you can in a short amount of time. Just raw, distilled fun. Stupid fun. Actually, all the side missions are really good for all the characters, all worth the time to check out, especially the ones that involve flying a plane. There's definitely a learning curve there, but once you learn how to fly an airplane, you'll love it. You won't want to drive another car again. There's the usual Grand Theft Auto fare as well. Racing, stunt jumps, tons of collectibles. But one thing I definitely think you should check out is the stock market in this game. It's definitely more volatile than like the real life economy of like the real world, but it's great investing money in a stock and like checking in how your stocks do. I almost got obsessed with the stock market in this game, which is really weird. It's not something I expected to get into. There are a few missions, in fact, where that will see a big jump in some stocks. Let's say that you're about to kill the CEO of a company or something, so you invest a bunch of stock in their competitors before you do it, and then you get a crazy return because their stock just jumped up from that illegal action you performed. Obviously, don't do that in real life, but which I think is the theme for Grand Theft Auto in general. Don't do any of this in real life. But try out the stock market. Man, all the hilarious side characters in here, too. It's just packed with so much good stuff. The talk radio, the commercials on the radio are all hilarious. The television, man, I could just set my controller down and watch my character watch the parody of American television that they've put together for hours, and I would be doing nothing, and I'd be having a great time because it's so funny. And I think all of that together snowballs into my one-sentence review of the entire Grand Theft Auto franchise and why I love their game so much. And it's simply because Grand Theft Auto is the most comprehensive and bitingly sharp parody of America in general that I've ever experienced. And they're also crazy fun, too. So Grand Theft Auto 5, don't let the fact that it's only at number 5 deter you from checking it out, because it's an excellent game. And it's about to be beaten by number 4, which I know is going to rub some people the wrong way. This is definitely the least gamey game on this list. That's going to be a snag for some of my viewers. They like the hardcore game kind of stuff, but number 4 is Gone Home. It's an indie title, PC exclusive. And why is it not very gamey? Well, all you do is you walk through an unoccupied house at night during a thunderstorm, and you rifle through this house. You like pick up items and you look them around. You read notes. You open doors and you turn on lights, and you just look in and around things and explore. And in so doing, you piece together the story of the occupants of this house. And that's it. In a year where a bunch of PC indie games subverted my expectations, Antichamber, Stanley Parable, Brothers, they all did. But I think this game did it the most subtly, and as such, the most effectively. Now, this year, ludonarrative dissonance was a big snag for a lot of people when it came to otherwise deeply loved games. A lot of my games I really loved got big-time harassment for their ludonarrative dissonance, including like Tomb Raider. To review ludonarrative dissonances whenever the gameplay asks you to do something that is in direct opposition to the story or the elements of the story, like the plot, characters, or setting. And whenever they sort of bump heads like that, and it doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it. But let me just say then that this is probably the least ludonarratively dissonant game I've ever played, in that the gameplay is the story. All you're doing is you're just rifling through this house. But, as you do so, you'll find a crumpled note in the garbage that'll reveal something about a character. Or you'll find a personalized mixtape. Or a hidden stack of Playboy magazines in the father's house, in the father's room. Shortly thereafter, you'll find a marriage counseling pamphlet. And you get these little disparate elements, and you begin piecing together the story of these people who you never see physically over the course of the entire game. But you feel like you end up knowing these people deeply and very effectively, too. And I haven't seen a narrative sculpted in this fashion ever before. And one would maybe ask the question, does voyeurism have anything to do with it? And I think everyone's a little bit voyeuristic, and it definitely has something to do with it. You're basically rifling through their personal lives, the world that they've created for themselves. And it's not that you feel uninvited, it's just that you feel a little bit separate from it, and I don't know. It's just very, very unique. The game's also punctuated with a few voiceovers, and I gotta say these voiceovers are very sincere, very heartfelt, and it's just a girl talking, and they sound like diary entries essentially, but it feels so personal, and it's very effective, and it pulls you into this world. I know a lot of people right now are scoffing at this choice. It doesn't sound like a game, but I would argue that it is a game, because player agency and how thorough you are is directly proportional to the depth of the narrative. If you decide not to open this drawer or not to explore this room, you are, in essence, sculpting the narrative that you perceive, whereas somebody who had looked in that drawer or gone in that room would have those pieces of the narrative, and they would have a slightly different experience. And I think that's what it wouldn't work as anything other than a game because of that. And there's definitely some 90s nostalgia here for me as well. I think that factored into my enjoyment of the game. The audio tapes, the VHSs, the love for Super Nintendo and Street Fighter, all was very nostalgic for me as a 90s child. So that definitely worked for me, endeared me to the experience in ways that somebody who didn't maybe grow up in the 90s in America wouldn't get as much. I would recommend that you play it alone. I would recommend that you play it with an open mind and no time restrictions, so you can really just beat it in one sitting and just get lost. You'll be surprised by how easily you become invested in this experience. And whether or not you think it's a game, that's fine. Feel free to flame me in the comments all you want for this choice. But it was just one of my favorite narrative experiences of the year, and to not put it on this list would be a severe disservice, and I highly recommend it. Seriously. So, Gone Home. There we go. That was 6 through 4. Please share with me your thoughts. Tell me you hate me for having Gone Home, having that ungame beat Grand Theft Auto 5. I encourage it. Encourage it all. And stay tuned. Monday, coming at you with my top 3 games. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time.